Alrighty everyone, welcome back to another video. Now, today's video isn't a build video or a funny moments video. No, today we're here to talk about the current state of Prismatic Titan. Now, I think this conversation is very warranted as there have been a plethora of players within the community acknowledging that Titan feels a bit worse in comparison to some of the other classes. Especially considering that of the 4,134 Guardians that cleared Salvation's Edge on contest mode, only about 1% of them were playing on Titan at the time of completion. So yeah, there's definitely a problem here. So let's look at our Prismatic Titan, starting out with our super offerings. When looking at the Prismatic Titan supers, the easiest one to use at base for the highest boss damage is Twilight Arsenal. This is because after the first axe, the target is weakened, which will have them take more damage from the following axes. And within the current sandbox, there's also a couple of mods and fragments that will increase the damage. Now, Glacial Quake has the potential to be the highest damage super for Prismatic Titan, but this is a roaming super, whereas Twilight Arsenal is a one and done for the most part. But some of our other offerings aren't even competitive with their damage. Thunder Crash, while it is just an instant super, sits at a meagerly 350,000 damage. Blade Fury coming in at a base of around 600k for a roaming super. Twilight Arsenal at base is about 630k, which is really good for a one and done. Hammer of Soul, which just got a 25% buff, is still very inconsistently hitting 500,000. Especially when a boss is moving and the sub-explosions don't hit the boss. And it's a roaming super. And even with a bad damage rotation, Glacial Quake still hits just under 900,000, which I'm sure could be optimized to break 1 million. But just look at these numbers. Of the 5 supers, only 2 of them can be viable in boss damage scenarios. And of those 2, only 1 of them can damage every boss in the game, as some bosses like the Witness can't be attacked with melee supers. Now, some of these supers could benefit from just a flat-out damage buff, but others, like Hammer of Soul, need a little bit extra help. In this case, I would love to see the projectiles or sub-explosions scorch and ignite targets, making this a lot better of a damage super and perhaps worth the trade-off of not being able to damage with your weapons while in the super. Thunder Crash is another one that could use some love. Either an outright damage buff or let the aftershock explosions jolt targets. But just give it something. Supers like Blade Fury could benefit from just a slight damage bonus. And supers like Twilight Arsenal and Glacial Quake are pretty good where they are right now. But supers are only the first part of this equation. Let's turn our attention now to some of our abilities. Now naturally, I don't have a problem with the class abilities or jumps. But the melees is where I think we're missing something. Now for starters, I would hate to see Bungie take away options. So I don't want them to come in here and remove things. That being said, it might be a bit too broken to keep adding onto the Prismatic kit, reducing the viability of other subclasses. But please, let me know what you think about this down in the comments below. For the sake of argument, we're going to assume that Bungie does not remove any current options available to the Prismatic kit and only adds on to them. I would love to see the Throwing Hammer melee from Solar and the Ballistic Slam from Arc be added to the Prismatic kit. Adding these would really help to fill out the melee options on Titan, giving you access to every type of Titan melee. Especially something like Throwing Hammer having a theoretical infinite uptime, which would be a very different approach to current Prismatic melee builds that are only centered around the consecration aspect. It would also be great for its ability to cure you upon pickup after hitting a target. Ballistic Slam would just be another cool avenue for melee builds, but I would like to see it gain the ability to blind targets on hit. The addition of these 2 melees would help with the current selection of melees on Prismatic Titan, as for the most part, everyone uses Frenzy Blade for the 3 melee charges. As for our other current melees, increasing the damage against targets in PvE would be a very appreciated change to increase their viability. Now, in terms of grenades, I would love to see the Solar Fusion Grenade added to their kit, as well as Arc's Lightning Grenade. Similar to the suggested melees, these would help add new types of grenades with different functionality to the current options. This would also help with build crafting options, as it would help with some more unique exotic synergies, like Ashen Wake for fusion grenades. As for our current selection of grenades, there's not really a whole lot of negative things to say about them. Each of them have their own use scenarios and perform the job really well, leaving my only suggestion for grenades to be adding fusion grenades and lightning grenades. Now, our aspects is where some big in-depth options start to come up. let's start with our current offerings, starting with the good and ending with the not so good. Knockout is a very good aspect. Getting increased melee damage, amplified, and health back on melee final blows is very good and has a lot of utility with every melee build. Consecration is another really good aspect, giving our melee some big damage and the capability to stun unstoppable champions via Scorch and Ignitions. Now, in the current sandbox, this is a bit overused at the moment, but it's not necessarily because it's overpowered, more so because it's the only option. So adding more would help lighten the burden of this. Now, for some more mid ones. Drenger's Lash in specific scenarios can be a very good aspect, allowing you to stun unstoppable champions with Suspend. But for me personally, the only way I use this in my builds is if it centers around my class ability, or if I'm using it with Abeyant Leap, as it's a bit more niche to build into. Next is Diamond Lance, which is also pretty viable while still being very niche. Now this can stun unstoppable champions via shadow damage, and can also be especially good with Cadmus Ridge Lance Cap, but requires a little bit more setup. These two aspects generally focus on crowd control, but more so in the stunning of enemies rather than the killing of them. And now for the not so good. Unbreakable. I'm sorry, but I don't like this one. Unfortunately, this just needs a complete rework. The function of using up my entire grenade for a few seconds of a pretty good shield and a void overshield is just not a good trade-off for an entire aspect slot and a grenade. The exotic Ursa Furiosa only gives about an eighth of your super upon blocking a full volley of damage, which is not great. The frontal blast does not do a lot of damage and has a very small radius. So my pitch for an unbreakable rework would be to make it function as an in-air ability. Apart from Ballistic Slam, Titans really don't have access to any in-air abilities, things like the Hunter's Shadow Dive or the Warlock's Phoenix Dive. So, what if, while in the air, pressing the in-air activation key would consume your melee, and upon activating it, you summon a Void Axe that you throw to the ground, and on impact, it makes a weakening explosion that also gives you and nearby allies a Void Overshield. I think this would be really cool, as it's something that provides damage, debuffs, and buffs for you and nearby allies to take advantage of. But if we were to just buff Unbreakable in its current form, here's how I would go about it. Increase the size of the shield to about a full barricade. Let it give grenade energy back based on the damage blocked to you and allies. About 75% of your grenade for max damage blocked. And have it give a Void Overshield to you and nearby allies. With these changes, it might be a bit more considerable within builds, because at current, this is a very weak aspect. But now, let's turn over to what new aspects we could bring in. An overall problem with Prismatic Titan is a lack of damage resistance and or healing. Titans really only have Knockout and Unbreakable, which the latter of which we've already established to be pretty bad. I would love to see one or both of these aspects brought to the Prismatic kit, and that's Sol Invictus and Banner of War. Let's start with Sol Invictus. Solar ability final blows, Hammer of Sol impacts, and defeating scorched targets creates sunspots. Your abilities regenerate faster, and your super drains more slowly while standing in a sunspot. Sunspots apply scorch and deal damage to targets inside. Entering a sunspot applies restoration. So this could easily be changed to add any ability final blows spawning in these sunspots. This would give some added benefits to Hammer of Sol and potentially other supers, and would give Titans a very good way to generate more healing, especially when paired with something like Knockout and Throwing Hammer for a more melee focused build if Throwing Hammer gets added, or Ashen Wake with Diamond Lance for a more grenade focused build if Solar Grenades get added. Sol Invictus also gives a lot more room for exotic pairings, which only increase the build crafting potential of the Prismatic subclass. Now, let's discuss Banner of War. Banner of War. Defeat a target with a melee attack, finisher, or sword to raise a Banner of War that pulses with energy, periodically healing nearby allies and increasing melee and sword damage. Targets defeated by you and nearby allies charge the banner, increasing the speed of its pulses. So yes, another melee-focused aspect, but think of the possibilities here. This would again give many different avenues for exotic build crafting, like Severance Enclosure, or maybe even the new exotic centered around Banner of War, Wishful Ignorance. This would also give another avenue for healing on Titan, which could be really good when paired with something like Knockout or Sol Invictus, if added. Now, of course, Titans have many other aspects that are really good, so let me know which ones you would like to see added to the Prismatic offerings in the future. These two aspects both provide unique ways for Titans to gain healing and other benefits while also increasing the build crafting potential while on Prismatic, letting more exotics take advantage of the Prismatic subclass. Now for our fragments. I really don't have anything to say here. They're all in a really great spot and can synergize really well with any build with a large selection to choose from. The only other note I have is to let the thruster ability interact with barricade exotics. Things like Kepri's Horn or Crest of Alpha Lupi would be really cool to see interact with your thruster, except this one. I don't know how you would do that. You shoot through the... Never mind. Every class deserves to have its place within the sandbox, and while I've had a lot of fun playing with the current iterations of Titans, I can't deny that Warlocks and Hunters are able to do a lot of the same things and more. I love Titan. It was my first class as far back as Destiny 1, and I would love to see it regain some of its lost spotlight. But at the end of the day, I don't control what happens in this game. But I hope these suggestions are seen and considered by both the community and the wonderful game developers at Bungie. Seriously, y'all rock. So yeah, let me know what you think of these changes down in the comments below. And as always, stay alrighty.